My name is Stephen Shanti.
Where are you from?
I am from Middletown, proud to say, Middletown, Connecticut. What brings me here is to talk about how my family emigrated here with all the other thousands of Melillis or people from Melilli, and to talk about, which is unheard of in the Sicilian culture, especially in Middletown, how a shoemaker, such as my grandfather, influenced me in being able to dance on Broadway, to be able to be a professional dancer. So.
My grandmother, my father, and his two sisters came here in 1930. My dad was 8 years old when they got here. And obviously, I mean, my grandfather, I think, had made the decision that he was going to make his fortune in the United States.
So my grandfather left in 1955. My mother and my uncles and my grandmother were still back in Sicily. They didn't come until a year later.
My father came here from Connecticut with his brother. They had a sister in New Britain.
So they all pretty much came over to start a new life, and my grandparents came with them. My grandparents were going to get everybody situated and then leave. But then, unfortunately, when I was about 7-ish years old and my brother was 6, my parents didn't work out. My mom left. So my grandparents felt the obligation to stay and help raise us while he was working 2-3 jobs.
What did he come with? He came with about 3 suitcases. That was it. He came with 3 suitcases and a dream.
We came with nothing. And you gotta get the opportunity when you got it.
He was not a landowner, so he came here really for the opportunities.
My family came to America on both sides. My mom's side from the mainland of Italy, my dad's side from Sicily. They were escaping poverty. You know, they came here for the American dream. They came here for opportunity, and they both were in, substandard conditions. Sicily at the time was comparable to a third world country, and they came here to America for a better life.
They were poor, and they, as one uncle said, they had heard that the streets were paved with gold in America, and that was the dream.
For a better life, like most of the Sicilians came here, because, Sicily, as you know, most of the southern Italy was pretty much after the unification of Italy by Giuseppe Garibaldi, was really povere, really poor.
And pretty much why did everybody leave Italy back then? Because, I mean, you visit there now and you scratch your head wondering, how could they leave, right? I mean, it's just beautiful over there. How could they leave this? And things must have been, the poverty must have been so overwhelming and no way to break out of it.
And he found out that his brother, Sebastiano, was in Middletown. So he came to Middletown, he got a job at the Goodyear tire company. There used to be a big company that I guess employed a lot of the Sicilians. And then my grandfather telegraphed my grandmother and my 3 uncles and my mother to come to Middletown.
I was born in Middletown, Connecticut, July 18, 1927.
What was your father's profession?
He was a master mason.
He was.
His father sent him to school when he was old enough to hold the tools to be a mason.
Is what they built still standing today in Middletown?
The St. Sebastian Church. They built McDonough School. They built Stillman School. They built a couple of other schools.
You would think that the climate, everything here is so different from what they're used to, that this would be the last place they would have come. But obviously somebody got here, established roots, and must have written back and said, there's work here.
My grandmother and her sister came over from Italy when my grandmother was 13. And then I think it would have been my great-grandmother had 4 or 5 more children here. So that's a big family, and they all had children, and it kind of went on from there.
There is definitely a true American dream. I believe in it every day. I thank God that my family came here. It's not streets of gold either. It does take work to create a better life. And don't take your paycheck for granted. Not everybody has one. People are coming to this country for the very small basic needs that my own grandparents came here from, leaving the world from and coming here for. So I can't take any of that for granted.
It was April 2nd, 86, and the day was a Wednesday. I still remember the day. We get up 4 o'clock in the morning in Italy, and I remember all my family and everybody that came to the house to tell me goodbye. It was very emotional to see that. On the way out, my father said with my brother, "Oh, we gotta go see Grandpa Tommaso, no?" So we go to the house, and my grandpa was with my nonna, Grandma Luminata. They're already up. It was 4:30 in the morning. He already was downstairs, feed his donkey, you know what I mean? Get ready to go to work. They leave like at 5 o'clock in the morning. They already go to the farm. And I remember, I said goodbye to them. And my grandfather, Tommaso, remember, he gave to me a huge hug. And he said to me, "Me and you will never sit again." So I said, no, don't worry. So we go on the plane, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, on April 2nd, we are in New York. And for me, to see Italy, especially the airport, and then all of a sudden see New York City, it's a day and night. Something you never forget. You can't, for a few minutes, you can't talk.
My father's family is originally from the island of Sicily. My grandfather was born in Melilli. He came here the second time in 1923. He had to leave Italy because he was anti-fascist and they were going to kill him. My father was born in Sicily in 1920, and his legal name was Biagio Massimo Corvo. That's a surprise because his grandfather's first name was Biagio as well, but my grandfather used to call him Massimo. And he went to the Green Street School and studied under Ida Caguin, who was a great teacher, and she helped all of the immigrants from Sicily understand that they were now in America. They should be proud of where they came from, but they should try to Americanize themselves and embrace the concepts of freedom that America brings. He landed here on the same week that the Great Depression started. So he finished the 10th grade and then he went to work. And then he saw the war coming and he decided to join the Army before Pearl Harbor. He was already a buck private at boot camp, and he was busy writing the invasion plan for the island of Sicily and the development of partisan warfare. And he was 22 years old, and he never graduated from high school. So his commanding officer said to him, "Hey, Corvo, what are you writing?" And he says, "I'm writing the invasion plan of Sicily and partisan." He says, "Well, what are you doing in the quartermaster corps? You don't belong here. I got to get you out of here." So he said, "If you have political connections, I'll send you back to Connecticut. You tell them you want to be transferred to the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, which is the CIA today." So they transferred him over to OSS. He did an interview with a fellow by the name of Earl Brennan, and Brennan said, "You're the person I've been looking for. You have to start, I'm going to put you in a position to do great things and put your plan into effect, and you have to start by recruiting fellow Italian Americans to fight with you, to work on the partisan warfare side." And he said, fine. So he came back to Middletown and he recruited, out of Middletown, the first people he recruited were all well-known people. Vincent Scamperino, who was a prominent attorney, a young former Wesleyan football player and graduate, Mim D'Addario, who also was an attorney. He was partners with Scamperino. Seb Passanisi, who later became a prominent architect in Middletown. Sam Fraulino. They had a close-knit group that they put together. I did a presentation of a PowerPoint on my dad's work in World War II in Melilli. So Ezio Costanzo, who's a well-known Italian director, he's from Sicily, and he came up to me and he said, "Hey, we got to make a movie about this." And I said, "Yeah, all right." I didn't even know the guy. We became very good friends, and he kept bothering me. We got to get... About 3.5 years ago, he says, "You know what? I don't want to complain, but we're running out of time because we're both getting old." So I said, "Let's do it." It actually did its premiere in Sicily at the World War II Museum in Catania when they were celebrating the 80th anniversary of the invasion of Sicily on that day. And they had 800 people in the theater, and they gave them a 10-minute standing ovation.
One story I would like to add about discrimination that I do, or hardship and with being accepted into society, was my dad's first year out of high school. He went to work in a factory in Middletown, and he was called a very derogatory name by the supervisor. He was called a guinea by the supervisor at one point, which is a very derogatory term, and it still is to this day a derogatory term. And my dad elected to quit his job. He said that's it, he's going to quit. He saw everyone just stop and wait to see his reaction because that's how controversial it was at the time to call someone that name. He quit his job and he went home, and his father was saying maybe he needs to accept that this is part of the hardship of living in America. And maybe you have to roll with the punches like this and be called names like this and be treated like a second-class citizen. And he said no. He said, "No, this is the generation who was born here. This is going to stop. I'm not going to accept it. I'm going to still quit this job." The owner of the factory was so embarrassed and ashamed that the supervisor called him this name. The owner of the factory came to the house that night to make a formal apology and to offer my dad his job back. And my dad declined to take the job back. And the next day he enlisted in the U.S. Army. And he had a very successful career as a U.S. Army officer. He turned something very negative into something very positive. And I will never forget that.
My grandfather, I remember him talking to my uncles and my mother about when his brother first came here in 1917. The Italians at that time could not even cross the railroad tracks where St. John's School is. And they had to sit in the back of the church because they were Italian. That's the thing. I think that's one of the main reasons why they built St. Sebastian's, because of the prejudices that happened.
Nobody let Sicilians sit anywhere when they first got here. The reason that they ended up on the east side of Main Street in the North End is because that was the area that used to go underwater first.
When her mother came over, they weren't the women weren't, or the men maybe, weren't allowed to walk on the sidewalks. They had to walk in the street.
Why is that?
Because they were foreigners, they were immigrants. I mean, there was a real prejudice.
I was brought up, my mother spoke English to me. My father and my grandmother spoke Italian, but I would never answer in Italian. I just spoke English. I wanted to be an American, a good American. I wanted to be like the people. We went to school with a lot of children from Wesleyan. Their parents worked at Wesleyan, so they were totally different than us.
Her parents, they might speak Italian to each other, but to the children, they spoke English and they expected the children to speak English. They really did feel that they had to shed that identity.
And one time we had a teacher there. Our teachers were mostly good to us. This one teacher, a boy in the class said one word in the Sicilian dialect, just one word. And the teacher went to that boy and said, don't ever let me hear you speak that ugly language in this room. So that didn't bother me then, and it didn't bother anybody. And nobody told their mothers, so there was, you know, but in later years, I realized what happened.
But I went to school on Green Street at St. Sebastian's Grammar School. And, you know, this was really crazy. When I used to take the bus, we used to go to school at the same bus with the Polish kids from St. Mary's and the Irish kids from St. John's. And that's, unfortunately, my everyday routine. I fought a lot because it was a shame, you know, when you grew up that young with all the prejudices, you know, that still unfortunately exist in our society today. But I was called a lot of names. Hey, you guinea wop, get out of my seat, and we go back and forth. Oh, you Polak, you're this. And it was horrible, you know. But every day was like that. I mean, every day at a young age, I realized the prejudices that I received because of my culture.
We have to make some changes. If we move to a new country, learn English, try to get an education, do your best, absolutely. I don't think that we should face discrimination or be faced with derogatory name calling or, of course, segregation, or you're forced to not even go into a church sanctuary. None of that should happen. That's not a price to pay for a passage. No, that's un-American, actually. If you think about what our country really stands for, the Pledge of Allegiance, one nation, united, we should be united here so no newcomer is treated that way.
I didn't start realizing how beautiful it was the way I grew up until I went to college at the Boston Conservatory of Music, which is now the Boston Conservatory at Berkeley. And it just hit me, you know, how fortunate I was to grow up in such a beautiful time, you know, with a beautiful culture. And I'm very, very proud that, that I grew up the way I did, that's for sure.
The Middletown Sicilians having all come from the same town, these were, you know, relationships and connections that predated their you know, migration to the United States.
You could walk to church, you could walk to the grocery store. There was an Italian grocery store right on the street, Marino's, and it was very much, you know, a part of the city. It was all interconnected socially with a big social network of people and families that were interrelated, either through marriage or friendship or by blood.
Growing up in Middletown, it's a huge identity. We went to St. Sebastian's Church. I went to St. Sebastian's School. It wasn't until I got to high school that I realized that not everybody's name ended in a vowel. It just, I didn't know. I mean, I thought, I thought everybody was like us.
Because my grandparents came here from Sicily, that was kind of like our home. Like, so my mom worked one or two jobs maybe. He worked his multiple jobs. Yeah. So my grandparents were there, because I went to St. Sebastian's on Green Street when the elementary school was there. And then it moved to Durant Street on the other side of Middletown. But I would just, because we were on Green Street, I walked home and whatnot, and was raised by my grandparents. They would feed us, clothe us. You know, we would sometimes stay overnight. But then my parents lived just a couple blocks away.
Everyone knew everybody. I mean, example, we all go to St. Sebastian's Church on Sunday service, right? I mean, everybody in that church. It used to take us an hour, sometimes an hour and a half to get out of there, because my mother, we were talking, this lady who would, you know, gummare con dandine, come si, blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, then they would go off and you know, we were sitting there and you're a kid, it's like, Mom, I'm hungry. I want to go home and eat.
If we got in trouble, my parents already knew when I got home what I had done.
You were at McDonald's and you did this, that, and you're, oh, Jesus. I mean, what were you doing at Palmer Field after, you know, where all the football games is? You know, what were you doing at that discotheque? How do you know I went to Twilight Room in the Berlin Turk? You know, that was cool. And it's unfortunate that today, you know, it's not like that today in our society. But growing up in Middletown, at the time that I did, everyone kind of, hey.
I jokingly say that Middletown, Connecticut, if you're Sicilian and you throw a rock, you can probably hit a cousin in the head.
Our parents were, were no. And, I got my first tattoo, and I didn't think I was ever going to get a tattoo, and it's a cross to show, our family faith. And then it says nonna and nonno, because they were pretty much, they were pretty much, our parents. Because our parents were working all the time. There was times where I would ask my father, Dad, can I go to my friend's house? He'll be like, go ask your nonna and your nonno. Those are your parents. I go, okay. He wants to speak a little Sicilian.
A mamma mia viene di Melilli e si chiama Sardine e mio papà è Giuseppe Giuliano.
You don't have to scream.
E io vengo di Melilli.
I think that my parents and grandparents were extremely influential on me, and they shaped me, and it's still in me forever. Those formative years do count for the rest of your life. And my dad's dad lived with us for a couple of years towards the end of his life, and I would hear Italian spoken in our home. I saw a lot of the cuisine and the food that I got very attached to, of course, and wanted to start cooking myself as I grew up.
What I want to do is I want to learn how to make scacciata. That's what I want to, the Italian version of, it's like a calzone, but flattened out into like a semicircle, like a half moon. And my mother made the broccoli sauteed with the red wine and olive oil, garlic, and melted mozzarella cheese with sliced sausage. Oh. And then we have the scacciata chibadate with the potatoes, the scalloped potatoes, with the crushed tomato sauce. Oh, that's what I want to learn how to make, the scacciata. That's strictly what the Milanese brought to Middletown.
My grandfather made homemade pupette, meatballs, and he made it differently than a lot of people. He would do white cooked rice in it to make it nice and moist, and then he would fry them. He would make them up like round but flattened on the top so that he can fry them in a little bit of oil and flip them. They were nice and crispy on the outside. Oh, they were so good.
Well, we had gingulena during Christmas time, of course. We have sfingi too, which you dip in the honey. And then the other Italian cookies were the red, green, and white, with the chocolate on top. So we always had a nice feast going house to house.
Even when I was growing up, there were maybe 40, 50 small mom and pop little grocers around town. And you look at that and you say, you're telling me things are better? There were those each one of those markets supported a family. My mother, I remember, if she wanted something, she would call her cousin, and she'd pretty much say, "What you got today? What's good today?" And he'd tell her, "Oh, I got some pork ribs, and I can cut them into pork chops for you." And just came in. It's really good. And they were used to buying what they needed, what they were going to make that day.
But we used to do the tomato sauce in summer. And one of the houses, it was a duplex house. He would have big pots, and if you go there with your tomatoes, he would cook it for you. And so we had lines of people waiting in line to do that.
We used to go to Marino's restaurant a lot on Ferry Street, and my grandmother's sister and her brothers were the bakers, and she ran the restaurant. And we would go there a lot, sometimes on Fridays, sometimes on the weekend, every once in a while. But the thing was to get the hamburger pizza with the hamburger on top and sauce and the cheese on top of that, and yeah.
Viquito's is, they're open seasonally, and they make Italian ices.
My father decided he'd get me in the business of making the ices and everything. And we used to manufacture them at the same location we're at now. We used to make it down in the basement, and we started that in 1930. My father bought me a 1928 Overland Whipper truck. And that was to get me on the road with the ices in 1930.
They always made ice, Italian ice.
And I used to go up and down the streets all along the east side to peddle the ices. And it'd be mostly from the south end all the way up to the north end. In and out of the streets. I'd go down Ferry, it'd be my last stop, and home. And we used to get 3 cents and 5, but our biggest sales were 3 cents. And it's a lot of kids, I'll tell you something, a lot of the children that wanted the ices, they'd ask their parents, could I get an ice? You had it yesterday. They have to skip a day. They couldn't get it every day. Things weren't that prosperous in those days, you know? And you had to live within your means.
Well, I will tell you this story that changed my life. I was 16. And at that point, in 1979, I must have won every disco contest in the state of Connecticut, you know? But I remember being asked to do the musical Fiddler on the Roof. And I was on the baseball team at Xavier. And this was the year I was gonna start because I played JV my freshman and sophomore year. And I remember talking to Brother Connolly, who was my religion teacher, but he was also one of the coaches for baseball. And I was torn whether to, because the rehearsal schedules and the games would conflict with rehearsals for doing the show. And some of the guys overheard me, and I really, they started calling me names, a lot of bad names that I don't want to say. So I got into a lot of fights. And one time I got into a really bad fight where I almost got suspended. And I remember my knuckles were all cut up really bad. And I was angry. And I remember driving my car at the time to my grandfather's shoe shop. And I told my grandfather that I didn't want to dance anymore. And I'd never seen my grandfather get angry, ever, at me. He got his shoe hammer and he threw it across the room and he goes, "Siete qua, siete vicino mio, voglio dire una cosa a te." He goes, "Sit over here, I'm going to tell you something." And he told me about when his father, when he had the scholarship to the conservatory in Palermo, and his father said, "You want to leave this town? You want to become better than me? Big shot." He goes, "No, you're going to stay here. You're going to be a shoemaker like me." And he told me, Michelangelo painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel for people who look up. It was very from that day on, I went to Brother Connolly and I said, we used to call him Brother Cannoli. Yeah, that was funny. And I said, I'm going to quit the baseball team and I'm going to do the bottle dance and Fiddler on the Roof. And from that day forward, my life changed because of my grandfather. Hello, Middletown. My name's Stephen Shanti, and I'm going to do a couple of wonderful characters from my one-man show, A Shoemaker's Tale. Qualche giorno, one day, figlio mio. Okay, go play, William Boran. But one of these days, you're going to say, "Papa, I know what you mean." And I did. Thanksgiving dinner, 1984, when I was a junior at the Boston Conservatory of Music, Dance, and Theater. "Oh, I watch out for my lawn, the son of a bitch." I drove my father crazy with that front lawn. Football, basketball, baseball. In spite of how he felt about it, sports became an important part of my life. Because sports was it, man. Sports was cool. And you had to be cool, especially when you went to an all-boys Xaverian Jesuit high school. And I was singing and dancing at the time. Antonio's words. might have been filled with venom and rage, and his words were right. But deep down inside at the same time, I knew what his heart was saying. Grandpa's dying, Stevie, and I'm going to miss him. Ciao, nonno. Come sei? Are you afraid of dying? After a few moments, he looked up to me and he said, I was at first just like any other man, but now I know I've lived a rich life, richer than any millionaire could wish. I've had love, I've had respect, and I've seen my family grow, and I wish you the same. And then he said, I'm proud of you, Stevangelo. Sì, io saccio, nonno. I know. You taught me when I was a little boy that everyone has good in them. And you said someday that I would tell you that you were right. Well, you are, nonno. You're right. You rest now. Riposate. Angelo Morello was born May 22nd, 1915, and died December 5th, 1990. And on the day of his funeral, not only was he remembered in Middletown, Connecticut, but nearly 2,000 people gathered in his hometown in Melilli, Sicily, to sing for him in St. Sebastian's Church. I thank all of you for joining me in celebrating his memory. I'm sure my grandfather would want me to say to each of you, state buono, stay good. And always remember what my grandfather once said. Michelangelo painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel for people who look up. You know what this song is called? Number 7. See, in Melilli, Sicily, some of my grandfather's friends were unfortunately somewhat illiterate and they couldn't read the title on the sheet music, but the song was on page 7. So they decided to call it Numero 7. That song was played at every feast of St. Sebastian's, both here and in the old country. After all, that was the name of both churches. When my grandfather emigrated to America, the Sicilians who lived in Middletown built an exact replica of their town church in Melilli, St. Sebastian. Huge church, holds 3,000 people. And on the Feast of St. Sebastian's, they used to have this big parade through the streets. My grandfather would play the trombone, my Uncle Tony would tickle the accordion, and I would march next to my father who played immigrati, the cymbals. And of course, my father's name, Sebastian.
My father developed the band, and he played for all the feasts. The first band, I believe, had 35 members, and most of them were from Middletown. Middletown had very many wonderful musicians. They had very good ears. They didn't study that much, but they didn't have to. They were self-taught mostly, and they were very good. And today there's only 2 musicians left. One is my brother Sam Vinci, and the other is my cousin Seb Jocko, who was Sam Vinci's godfather. My father brought over a lot of songs from Italy, and that was one that he introduced. And the rest, they were self-written, and Number 7 became a hit. It was called Number 7 because when my father rehearsed the band, he couldn't speak English, and of course most of the band members were born in Middletown, so he would number everything. So he would just say, well, let's practice Number 7, and it was a hit. And then everybody played it and liked it, and everybody recorded it. Even a Polish band wanted to record it. So it was a big hit in Middletown and still is.
They ask Saint Sebastian for certain blessings, and they say it in Italian. You're honoring Saint Sebastian. Samastiano. Samastiano.
That's first God, then Saint Sebastian.
Right. Yes.
And then he got introduced to the St. Sebastian feast in Melilli, Sicily, because the church that's here in Middletown is the sister church to the one in Melilli. So he started the tradition there. And the Feast of St. Sebastian is just a patron saint that on one weekend, everybody gets together to celebrate that patron saint. And the way we do it is we wear all white. It almost looks like the running of the bulls, but it's not. And then we have flowers and we carry the statue through town. It's something you would see in like the Godfather movie or something like that. It was funny, I went to Sicily when I was 18 and my cousin introduced me to her friend. She goes, oh, this is my cousin from America. And she goes, Middletown? I go, how did you know I was from Middletown? Oh, well, if you're from families from Melilli, that means if you're from America, you're from Middletown. So it was great for him to grow up with the church in St. Sebastian's as a child and then have it here. It's like he didn't skip a beat. But he does miss Sicily, of course.
This is the Church of St. Sebastian, Middletown. And it was built by the people from Melilli who had emigrated here. That was their patron saint. That was who they chose to honor. And trying to do that, to have that devotion out of St. John's was a little bit difficult and complicated for them. So they decided they wanted their own church. And actually they began the feast in 1921. And the purpose of the feast was to raise money to build a church here.
That's when the bishop finally says, okay, go ahead. You've got to raise $5,000. Go ahead.
To build your own church.
Build your own church. He didn't think they'd see $5,000.
How much were they able to collect?
They got maybe 50,000.
No, 5,000.
This one is a much simpler design than that one. And this church is actually based on a church that I'm not sure it exists anymore in Worcester, Massachusetts, Our Lady of Mount Carmel. It was designed by an architect by the name of Raymond Gorani, who designed a number of churches in the Northeast. The committee that was in charge of building this church actually went to Worcester to look at that one. You know, go online and look at some old pictures of that church, especially the interior. You would think you're looking at this. The first 2 weeks they worked on the church, they worked for no pay. And the second 2 weeks, they worked for half pay.
St. Sebastian's was definitely a hub for the culture and community. It was definitely a place, where people could worship, and I think it was a place for people to, maintain their faith. And we think about who St. Sebastian was. He was an early Christian, and he died for his faith. So we have to think about what that was really about, and also not to take our time in this country or our faith for granted, or our religious freedom for granted.
The Feast of St. Sebastian is over 600 years old. You go back to the beginning in the 15th century, and it still exists today. That's absolutely incredible.
I loved it. It's my parish, it's my tradition, and it's the most beautiful thing.
Different people come and gone, but the passion's still there, and that's wonderful.
Finalmente, siamo arrivati. Grazie signorina. Ben atterrati di nuovo. Ciao comparuccio.
I 54 sono una rappresentanza della società civile melillese, sono una rappresentanza della musica, una rappresentanza del mondo dei professionisti, una rappresentanza del mondo dell'arte, una rappresentanza politica. Questa spedizione, che è stata oggetto di finanziamento del Parlamento siciliano, ha voluto mettere in piedi una sintesi della nostra città per fare sì che poi, rientrati a Melilli, potessimo mettere e creare e comunicare ai nostri concittadini quanto è bella la nostra comunità in questa parte degli Stati Uniti, ma soprattutto quanto è rispettata oggi la comunità melillese a Middletown. Ho trovato lo stesso spirito di affetto, ho trovato la stessa sensazione di generosità verso una grande energia che è quella che ci collega, che è il nastro rosso che collega le due città fra Middletown e Melilli. Io sono uno convinto che Melilli è la città di San Sebastiano, e il fatto che i melillesi sono riusciti ad andare in un altro continente, a finanziare la costruzione di una basilica che assomiglia tantissimo alla nostra basilica, sono riusciti a trasportare oltre l'oceano le tradizioni, anche l'impostazione della statua qui è molto simile alla nostra. E il fatto stesso che dopo 611 anni dall'inizio dei festeggiamenti in un altro posto del mondo ci siano bambini scalzi con i piedi nudi che vadano qui a Middletown, nel continente moderno, in un'altra parte del mondo, a onorare questa devozione verso un santo che ha una storia particolarissima di ribellione, un militare che va contro l'imperatore, e che ancora oggi potesse essere, così forte l'energia dei cittadini melillesi tramandata alle altre generazioni. È una cosa fantastica, è una cosa che porterò all'interno del mio cuore per tutta la vita e che farò di tutto per tramandarla alle prossime generazioni e soprattutto alla futura generazione politica, perché devono sapere quello che noi abbiamo visto qui nel 2025. E ho chiesto al sindaco di Middletown di darmi questa opportunità di firmare e siglare un patto fra le due città che mi permetta di inviare i miei giovani qui a rendersi conto di quello che è successo in questa parte del mondo e quindi dare l'opportunità ai miei giovani di venire qui, studiare, parlare questa lingua, conoscere il siciliano perché noi non lo parliamo più, è ancora qui è parlato, e dare anche ai cittadini di Middletown la possibilità di venire da me a fare quello che fanno i melillesi qui. Sono le due fasce che ho sempre indossato nella mia vita. Una è la fascia del nudo, che abbiamo regalato qui ai cittadini di Middletown che fanno i nudi, che è la fascia che indossiamo per San Sebastiano, e poi l'altra, la fascia da sindaco, che porto dietro da 7 anni e che sono contento di averla indossata, era il sogno della mia vita. Oggi comunicherò qui che donerò la mia fascia a questa chiesa, la donerò a questa statua, la donerò a Middletown, perché questa fascia che ha portato tanta fortuna al sottoscritto possa portare ancora fortuna ai melillesi che hanno deciso di venire a vivere, di portare le proprie speranze, i propri sogni in questa parte del mondo. Ho fatto tanto con questa fascia, vorrei che continuasse in modo spirituale, naturale, umana a vivere da quest'altra parte del mondo. Grazie a voi, viva Middletown, viva San Sebastiano, viva Melilli.